invest in and follow principles. That has proved to be pretty successful.
This landlord's gonna make almost $2 million over the next 12 years for doing something one time. And that's like residual. This guy's got another 7 retail spaces and he's got 10 stories of apartments above it. And I'm like, man, I'm on the wrong side of the coin, right? I need to own real estate, not broker it.
You start doing deals that are absolutely life-changing, like that put you on the path for intergenerational wealth.
Welcome to the Real Estate Home Runs Podcast. I am your host, Luis Vanderhorst. This is a podcast for busy professionals who want to learn about passive income producing strategies that have helped others crush it in the real estate world. Whether you are a new or seasoned real estate investor, this is the podcast for you. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Real Estate Home Runs Podcast. And today's a really special episode because I have a fellow Latino with me. Alberto, thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome, Luis. Happy to be here, buddy.
Awesome. Tell us a fun fact about yourself before we get into today's topic.
You got it. A fun fact about myself. I love doing CrossFit. That's kind of my thing. I do it with my wife. So that's like something that we have an opportunity to have a date every night, if you will. So that's a fun fact right there.
Oh, that's awesome. I did not know you do CrossFit. Seems it's like an upper step of P90X or about the same or?
Yeah, I'm not that familiar with P90X, but P90 is something that where you do the exercise and you end up on the floor. That sounds about
Good. Hey, so tell us how you got started with real estate.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So let me tell you like a little bit ahead of that. Right. I came to this country in 1987, came to this country with a couple $100 in my pocket, came here. I was able to get myself through school, get myself with a master's. I got into technology, got into development, technology, and so forth. And I did that for a long time. But finance and real estate was always a passion of mine. Right. So around 2007, 2008, I bought my first house. Right. And that was like my own residence. Right. So I bought that, as you can imagine, by the year, I bought it right at the peak. Right. So when we bought it, they actually it was a townhouse of 10 houses in the building and all townhouses were sold. And as it turns out, only 2 of the people in the building were able to close. Right. Because that's when it hit the fan. Right. So and I got a divorce from there. Fast forward 5 years later, I negotiated with my wife. Basically, I said, hey, do you want to keep the house or do you want me to keep the house? And she said, oh, of course I want to keep the house, right? And she actually went back, ran the numbers, and it's like, I don't want the house. This house is underwater. It's not worth keeping it, right? So no problem. I kept it. And instead of staying there, I turned it into a rental. That was my first rental. And up until a few years ago, it was still underwater, right? So you would think it would have been a good lesson for me to not get into real estate, right? But I always have seen how powerful it is, right? And I have a lot of friends. And as you mentioned, I have a lot of mentors, right? And that's a lot of them. That's how they have become financially independent through real estate. I knew that it worked. I knew that my timing was wrong. So then a few years later, I bought a little rental property. And about 3 years ago, I said, okay, like this, it's time to just either do this or not do this, right? So in a span years, I actually bought 20 properties.
Wow.
I just went full hog, right? And not because I had a lot of money to invest and not because all of a sudden I came, my uncle died and I got a big inheritance. I just decided, okay, it's time to take the risk, right? So how did I get the money for all these things, right? I basically took out a bunch of lines of credits, right? On television, right? Like Upstart and Lending Club and Prosper. There's another one from Citizens. And there was an offer from, you name it, right? Like you've seen all these offers, right? Where they offer you to borrow $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. And they give you this money for like 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, and so forth. So like the interest rate on those things, they usually are going to run you around 6, 7, 10% around there. I also did a lot of balance transfers, right, on my credit cards, right? So not everybody knows that when you do a balance transfer, you don't necessarily need to use it to pay for another credit card. You can just actually balance transfer the money into your checking account, right? Like write a check to yourself.
Oh,
right?
As a cash advance?
As a cash advance, right? So it's a cash advance, right? Without all the fees of a cash advance, right? It still has the balance transfer fees, right? Where you only pay, normally it's about 3% fee for the cash advance. Give you free money for 12 months to 18 months. That's the normal range, right? Of how long they will lend you the money, like interest free, right? And you might be like, so what happens when the 18 months rolls around, right? You balance transfer it into another right? And balance transfer into that, right? So my wife and I have been playing that game for quite a while, right? So in order to do that, you have to be very careful that you really monitor your credit closely, right? So many people say, oh yeah, you can buy real estate, no money down, no credit, and so forth. I disagree, right? Buying properties with good credit is so much easier than when you have bad credit, right? So like if you're going to get into real estate, do everything possible to clean up your credit, get that 750 FICO, get that 780 FICO, so that it'll make it a lot easier, right? I mean, think about it. Put yourself from the side of the lender, right? How do they know that they're going to get paid? So if you have a good FICO, if you have good credit, they're going to give you the money, and they're going to give you the money cheap, right? If you don't have the good credit, they're going to like either not lend to you, or it's going to be astronomically high, and they're going to make the money. You're not going to make the money. So that was kind of my start into real estate, Luis.
Yeah, just a short snippet there, but it was good.
Yeah.
Sure. And with lenders, they're looking at the risk factors and like whether someone is worth them investing with and whether they'll be able to get their money back.
Yeah, I mean, you were mentioning that you're getting into like multis, right? Into like big apartment buildings, right? And one of the things that
before our call here.
Yeah. So when you get into big apartment buildings, you're going to have all those like general partners, all those GPs, right? And one of those GPs is going to be the guy that has the credit, right? That the bank is going to say, yep, you know what? I'm going to lend this guy $3 million, $5 million, whatever those big buildings cost, right? And for that, the fact that he has that beautiful credit, he's going to get 1-2% is not an abnormal commission for putting his name on the line, right? To be able to like secure that loan, right? So getting into real estate, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to make sure that you clean up your credit, work on it, right? The good news is that no matter how bad your credit is, after 7 years, pretty much, right? I could give or take 2 or 3 years if you have a bankruptcy, right? But pretty much after 7 years, every sin that you have ever committed will be forgiven, right? And in a lot of times, it'll be a lot quicker than that, right? Like there's definitely ways you can clean up your credit by getting unsecured cards and so forth. I was just having a conversation with a friend, right? I keep on pushing him, right? Like, dude, you got to make some moves, right? He's in his 40s. He's still living at home, right? It's like, come on, man. And I asked him, like, do you have good credit? And they go, yeah, of course I have a good credit. He's like, I asked him, how do you know? He goes, well, I don't know. So he even really like looked into it, right? And I asked him, do you have credit cards? What do you have? He goes, I have nothing. And I told him, go pull your credit. I guarantee you that you have bad credit. I mean, you have a low FICO, right? Which is different than bad credit, right? But the reason that he has a low FICO is because he has no credit. And having no credit is almost as bad as having bad credit, right? If you haven't proven to these lenders, right, that you are worthy of getting their money, right? So it's so powerful. I mean, I'll give you an example. Like with Wells Fargo, I've been a client with them for, 15, 20 years. And now I have this thing where with the stroke of a pen, they'll lend me $100,000, $200,000 just on my name, right? So how powerful is that if you come into a deal, right, into like a nice property that's worth whatever, right? 100K, 150, right? But it's a $200,000 property. To have that ability to tell the buyer, right? To tell the seller, I'm going to pay you cash like in 7 days, right? Like, let me just pull title, make sure it's clear. I like your house. And just with the stroke of a pen, be able to do that, right? And then you refinance the house, right? Knowing that it's going to refinance for a lot more. Maybe even get some cash out of that deal, right? Pay your line down and then rinse and repeat, right? So many ways that you can play this game, Luis.
Yeah, so many different ways to skin the cat.
100%.
And with those credit cards that you were applying for loans, do you do it under your personal name or do you do it through an LLC?
Both. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a little bit complicated. And the reason that it's in both, right, is because when you get into real estate, one of your biggest partners, and people don't realize, one of your biggest partners is going to be your bank, right? So just like you do with any of your other partners, you have to go talk to your partners and find out what do you need, right? And so if a bank tells me, I'm not going to lend you if it's under an LLC, right? Then they're like, cool, let's not put it under an LLC. If they say it's perfectly fine to put it under LLC, then you go ahead, right? But that should be the first place that you need to go and ask before you sign your contract, right? Then before you put any property under contract, make sure that you have that conversation with the bank. It's okay to put it under an LLC. It's not okay to put it on an LLC. It has to be personal name. So just work with the bank and whatever they tell you, that's what you do.
Mm-hmm. And that's the beauty of real estate, that you have different, it could be a beauty and also hurts at times if you have the wrong partners.
Yeah. For sure. Oh my God. The importance of partners is, wow. You cannot imagine, Luis. I mean, having the right partner is worth their weight in gold. Having the wrong partner can set you back years and years and years. I'll give you this example, right? I mean, like, who is your most important in life? And I know you know this, and we already spoke a little bit about this before our call, right? The most important partner in your life, and this is going to sound very kind of callous, right? The most important business partner in your life is your spouse, right? If your spouse is not on board with what you're doing, I don't care if you're partners with Warren Buffett, you're not going to be able to make it, right? I mean, she has to be on board. She has to be on the same page as you and so forth. So that's like one of the first conversations that you have to have, right? So I had a long-term relationship back in the day, I don't know, 20 years, 30 years ago, and she was the wrong partner, right? She definitely was not pulling her weight. She had very different thoughts about what finances should be, you know, just spending money like crazy and so forth, right? And that set me back a long time, Luis, right? And my current wife, she's awesome, right? She's, as you can imagine, there's always going to be a little bit of a few things that we're not on the same page, right? She's always gets very nervous when we buy the next property and the next property and the next property. She's always very nervous, which is understandable. And that actually kind of helps the situation, right? Because that forces me to really be very careful about the steps that I take, right? Like, I know it's just not me, right? Like, when you have other people that are counting on you, you always do that double check, right? Make sure that we do the right thing, right? So, but yeah, she's been awesome. She's an accountant, so she does the accounting. That's been an amazing blessing as well, right? I mean, our tax return is now like over like 200 pages. So the fact that it doesn't cost a whole lot of money is a great thing. I keep on teasing her that the next thing that she needs to do is she needs to become an attorney so that she can also be the, play that hat, you know, play that.
Yeah. My wife said to me, you couldn't afford me, so you married me. She's really good. Her dad is a financial planner. So she's kind of got that mindset, and it's important that, your spouse has the same mindset as you, or at least similar goals.
100%. Yeah, I mean, and to that regard, I mean, I know this is a kind of like a business podcast, real estate podcast, right? But there's a phenomenal book that I recommend every single person to read before you get married, right? The name of the book is called Lies at the Altar. Lies at the Altar, right? Lies. Right? And this is a book about the lies, not the lies that we tell to other people, lies that we tell to ourselves, right? And it's a book that's going to help you start a conversation with your potential life partner, right, about their goals, right? And there's so many, we don't really like think about what it entails to get married, right? What are you going to do about kids? What are you going to do about finances? What if one of us dies? What do you think about buying versus renting? What about the family, right? Like, is your mom going to live with us, right? Like, all these conversations that we just assume in our head. Oh, yeah, of course my mom is going to live with us. Of course, like, Karen is going to be okay with her living with us. But if you don't talk to them, it's not going to happen, right? And I was just actually this very conversation even after I read the book, Luis, right? I was having this conversation with my wife this morning, right? And I was telling her, I make the mistake very often of not keeping her in the loop of all the moves that I'm making, right? Just because right now I feel like we're so in tune, right? And like she can almost like read my mind. It's like, yeah, she knows already because I kind of like telepathically told her. But no, you have to communicate, constantly tell her what you're doing and so forth to make sure that she's on the same page. Right? She's being very supportive. We keep on making like all this, what other people would consider risky moves, right? Which I don't think that they are. I think if they're not, it's risky not to do them, right? But she's totally on the same page, but I gotta keep on talking to her. No doubt about it. Same thing with you, Luis. I mean, make sure you're much younger. But if anything, that's like the advice that I have for you, buddy.
Thank you. Yeah, for my wife and I, going through premarital counseling really helped us to talk about the finances, our goals, even the intimacy and all of that.
Sure.
Because all of that is important.
And it doesn't stop when you get married. I mean, like, we've been married for 8 years now, and I make the mistake. Oh yeah, of course she knows, but yeah, like communication is so key, and it has constant and frequent and over communicate for sure.
Awesome. So tell us about a deal that you have done, from how you found it to how you financed it, and what was your exit strategy, or if you still have it.
Great question, right? So I already told you about my worst deal, right? Which was my primary residence, right? I'm finally going to be able to refinance that property out in a year or two. But that's the crazy part, right? Even for the worst deal that I ever made, right? I bought that house in 2008. Now we're 2021, 13 years later, and it's kind of correcting itself, right? Like, now it's cash flowing. It wasn't cash flowing when I first started renting it. Now I'm going to be able to refinance it, right? So through this years, even with these losses, I've been able to claim the depreciation, right? I've been able to make some tax moves on that, right? So even with the worst deal that I had, right, it's still a good deal. Right. So that kind of hopefully helps people, right, to kind of make that leap, right, and not be waiting for that perfect deal where you're going to be able to get it at 50% LTV and it has no issues, and just jump into the pool and do it, right? So the rest of the deals, probably my best deal that I've ever done is the ground up construction that we just did over here in East Brunswick, right? Where we kind of knew from the get-go that it was going to be a good deal just because we bought the lot at the right price and we had a pretty good handle on what our costs were going to be. And as you can imagine, right, and building through this pandemic, I mean, there was definitely some lumber prices went up and all this kind of crazy stuff. And it was not without its issues and not without its headaches and not without its heartaches, right? But yeah, we were able to make like a ton of money on that, right? And the reason that we were able to make such good money was because partners, right? So I have two partners in that deal. Never in a million years would I by myself say I'm going to get into ground up construction, right? I do not have that kind of knowledge, right? My two partners are the ones that know how to do this, right? So the first partner is my buddy from 15 years, and we've been buddies, right? He's done already like 21 flips. He's already done like 3 ground up construction deals, right? Which that sounds like, oh, nice resume, right? Like that sounds like somebody that has some experience. From the other two partners, he's the one that has the least experience. So the other partner is his dad, and his dad is 7 years old. I am not exaggerating, dude. This guy has built over 1,000 homes, right?
Wow.
So that is a lot of experience.
Yeah.
Right. So I felt very, very safe doing it with them. Of course, you still want to make sure that you're on the same page as far as being conservative and so forth, knowing that they're going to pull their weight. I knew that from the get-go because I partnered with my friend before, right? We've done really well. I partnered with him in the notes that I was telling you about before the interview. We did mortgage notes together. And yeah, I mean, it was just a matter of executing, right? But let me give you a quick little story about that build, right? So we get there, one of the first days of construction, we do the dig, we do the excavation. This was my first ground up construction project, right? So I get there and I see this hole in the ground that where they're going to put the foundation. I'm like, cool, the hole is in the ground. We're good, right? My friend's dad, he comes over, he looks over and he looks at the hole and he goes, guys, you overdug. I'm like, did he take out a measuring tape? Did he have a laser in his hand? Like, how does he know?
Figure that out?
He just knew. He looked at the hole and he knew that we overdug by about half a foot, right? So if we had just kept on going and put the foundation without fixing it, I don't know, it might have gotten to the point where we could have not sold the house, right? Because it was not done to plan, right? Like according to the specifications, right? But because Boris was there, he was able to spot that right away and we got it fixed immediately, right? So that's why you need some strong partners, right? That can complement your weaknesses. So yeah, that probably as far as, you know, like in real, the best deal. The other thing that I wanted to mention is I have never bought, right? I was telling you too before, Luis, right? I have 22 properties so far, right? Hopefully double that in this year. That's kind of my goal. I hope my wife is not listening right now, but that's the goal. Double that this year. I've never bought a property off market. Every single property has it from the MLS, right? And I would say every single property was very close to what Zillow said that the property was worth, right? And the reason that I bring that up is because, again, don't get hung up on, I need to get a deal, I need to get like a crazy home run. I had a formula, right? Where if I knew that the property was going to give me like a 10 cap, and I don't know if we need to get into explaining cap for your listeners, right? But if I could get a deal where I knew that I was going to get a 10 cap return, that's it. I pulled the trigger, like no matter what, right? I mean, and
if you could just give a brief explanation of what the cap rate is, just for those listeners that are new. Yeah. You got it.
Yeah. So for the most part, right, like capitalization rate or cap rate is a term that's used more for multifamilies, right? For like the big properties, right? But I think even if you're a small property investor, it behooves you to learn these terms because the banks are going to start talking to you about this, right? So the cap rate is nothing but your NOI, right? Your net operating income divided by the price of the property. Now, net income does not include your finance costs, right? It does not include the interest rate, right? So it's just purely on the other expenses that you have, right? Your insurance, make sure that you put in some repairs, your HOA, if it's a condo, utilities, right? I mean, utilities, if the tenant is not paying the utilities and so forth, you got to make sure that every expense that you can think of is included, right? So another one that a lot of people miss is your vacancy rate, right? I always put a contingency there for vacancy rate, right? And it's hard to calculate because maybe your property may be empty for 2 months. It might not be empty at all, right? You might have a tenant that's been there for 2 years. But at the end of the day, when you're doing the purchase, you want to make sure that you're calculating what they call a pro forma cap rate, right? Meaning what you think the property is going to produce, and make sure that it's your pro forma cap rate, not what the seller is telling you what their pro forma cap rate is, right? A lot of times the seller will say, oh yeah, taxes are these, taxes is this, throw in a little bit for insurance, and those are your expenses. No. Like, what about management? I always put a little bit for management, even though I self-manage, right? But I still want to count that in. Put in your vacancy rate, put in your expenses for repairs and so forth that you're always going to have, right? Something's always going to break, guaranteed, right? So make sure that you account for those costs, right? So that's what cap rate is. Your NOI, net operating income, divided by the purchase price, right? So if your net operating income for a property is $10,000 and you bought the property for $100,000, your cap rate would be 10% in that example. Make sense?
Very good. Yep. Yeah. And I like, yes, to here and there be able to break down terms, because I sometimes get into the real estate lingo and people are like, wait, what is that?
That's right.
But then, with banks, you got to know what the cap rate is, debt service cover ratio, the income expenses, all of that needs to be laid out. And it's something that comes through time and experience. None of us learn overnight. It's been a journey.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the other one, right? Let's talk about ROI, right? Like your return on investment.
That's another one,
right? A lot of people confuse ROI with cap rate, right? But like the reason that I bring that up is if you buy a property and you don't have any money in the deal, right? And you're making money from that property, what is your ROI, right? It's infinite, right? Meaning like ROI, the formula for ROI is the money that you're putting in your pocket divided by the money that you put in the deal at the beginning, right? So if you didn't put any money in the deal, your ROI is infinite, right? So to that example that I was giving you, right, where I was buying properties with lines of credit and using the rest of the money from the bank, right? Like the bank would lend me 75%. I would put the other money from the line of credit. If I don't have any money in the deal, and if I'm putting any money in my pocket, infinite return, right? So that's a beautiful thing. And you can certainly do that sometimes, right? So sometimes you have to wait a little bit, right? For like rents to go up and so forth to get to that point where you can do a cash out refinance and so forth, right? But if you can do that from the get-go, that's a home run. Like don't even
with none of your money.
Yeah. Beautiful thing, right? And we're talking about how it's important to have good credit. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important to have good credit and a good reputation, right? Because it is going to allow you to do all these deals where your investors are going to have this trust on you, and they'll be, please like take my money, put it to work, right? I'm getting like nothing in the bank right now, or the stock market is risky, right? Or I want to diversify my holdings, right? Like, please take my money and invest it for me and give me a good return.
Yeah, I love how you dabble into leveraging credit. Talked about being on the same mindset as your spouse, significant other, because it's a holistic approach. Yeah, we could be successful in the business, but like if your marriage is failing, you gotta water that, you gotta nurture that. And I would love for you to, and I think that's also what got us talking. You share something on Facebook on how to leverage time, and I would love for you to share a little bit more about practical ways that maybe people could leverage their time, or how you have maybe leveraged your time instead of, how to mow the lawn. Is that really how you want to spend your time? Probably not.
That's right. Yeah, it took me a little while. I post a lot of stuff on Facebook, so it took me a little while to remember which one you were talking about, Luis. But yeah, when you said mow the lawn, I remember that one specifically, right? So let me kind of explain to the listeners what the post said, right? And like delve into it, right? So I've been a homeowner for what did I say, 2008, right? So like a lot of years, right? And for a long time, it was under an HOA, so I didn't have to worry about lawns because the homeowners association took care of it. But now I do have a standalone home. And even here, we've been here for, I think, 8 years. I've never mowed the lawn, right? And because it's much better in my mind, right, to pay somebody $75, $100, whatever they're willing to charge, right? As long as it's a reasonable number, right? And for me to use that time to be looking for properties, to be writing books, to be talking to people like you, right? So that we can further market our businesses and so forth, right? That time is much better spent doing things like this, or spending with my family, right? I mean, I'm getting to the point where, you're kind of like I start thinking like, why am I doing all this work, right? It's to spend time with your family, right? So you're trading money for time, right? A lot of us trade time for money, right? And we're like, oh man, I'm making like $10 an hour. I'm making $100 an hour. I'm making $50 an hour, right? But at the end of the day, there's a cap, right? Like there's a top there, right? So you have to get out of that mindset of getting paid by the hour, right? And find a way to have your money pay for yourself, right? Or have your investments pay for yourself, right? And those investments, again, they don't necessarily need to start with your own capital, right? I mean, like it's easier if you have a little bit of capital, right, to get that rolling. But if you get to the point where you're smart enough, you're savvy enough, you're skilled enough to find something that's generating income on its own, right? And you get investors to kind of partner up with you. That's how you're going to be able to like really, truly leverage it and go crazy where you're not making $100 an hour, you're making $100,000 a deal. Right. And it's a beautiful thing. And that's where we should all kind of strive for. And it's a great way to kind of get away from the rat race, Luis.
I have a full-time job as a teacher, and that was what got my attention in real estate. I was like, so you're telling me that I can work less than teaching for a whole year and make more money than teaching? Exactly. I need to learn more about that.
Exactly. What do you teach, Luis?
Social studies.
Fantastic.
In inner city, yes.
Oh, wow. Love it. Love it.
So, yeah, I got 35 books. I put a fundraiser out there and a business came and funded it in less than 24 hours. So I was able to get 35 books of Rich Dad Poor Dad that I share with my students to read it as a class and just to teach those principles to them. Okay, like, you know what an asset is, you know what a liability is. What can you do to create a business that's going to help you stop trading time for money? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and see, how do you put a price on that, right? The fact that you're molding young minds, like, and already getting them into that mindset of, hey, guys, like, let's just think about the right way with money, right? And not get stuck on that poor mentality of just working for the man, right? And rather find ways to create businesses, you know, create value, right? I mean, at the end of the day, when you're getting into real estate, that's what you're doing, right? You're creating value for other people. You're providing housing for folks, right? You're providing returns for your investors, right? So you're returning, right? You're creating value for everyone, right? So what a great opportunity you have there, Luis. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And like what I was sharing before this interview is that before we went live is that I'm here where I'm at and have been able to accomplish what I have accomplished is because of other people pouring into me and sharing that knowledge and wisdom. That has really helped me out a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And to have like the inspiration too, right? I mean, it's one thing I say this all the time. When you see people like you have mentors and they're phenomenal and they're so generous with their time, but you see them doing what you want to accomplish, right? And I tell this to people all the time, right? If you want to accomplish something, it doesn't matter if it's finishing a marathon, if you want to be a master of the violin, if you want to be like the best social sciences student, social sciences professor or teacher, right? Emulate somebody that has been there before, right? Like go and talk to them, right? Listen to them, right? And by all means, do not listen to the people that have not done it, right? There's so many people out there that they're like, oh, don't get into real estate. It's risky. Like, don't go into social sciences. Like, you know, dude, this is my goal. This is where I'm going to go, right? But you have to listen to the people that have done it before you, right? So if you want to be a basketball player, listen to basketball players or copy basketball players. Like, don't copy anybody else. And it's such a simple lesson. And so many people miss that all the time.
Yeah. And also to add on to what you share is that like, these are people that are successful. They're busy. They have families, they have kids. Give them a reason to see value, like bring value to them, like as much value as they're bringing to you, try to bring value to them. And that was a lesson that I learned from Raising Private Capital with Matt Faircloth in his book. He says like, join a meetup, participate, see how you could help get the meeting started, hand out cards, whatever, provide value to the host. And in return, they'll be pouring into you as well. And that's something that I've been applying. And it's like just doors just keep opening.
Oh, yeah. You're so right, Luis. That's such an important law, right? I mean, I would call it like a law. If you don't respect that law, it's going to like pop you in the head, right? Like so many times, I'm sure you've seen it 1,000 times on Facebook, right? Where somebody goes to Bigger Pockets or something. It's like, I'm looking for a mentor who can mentor me, right? It's like, it doesn't work that way, right? I mean, there's plenty of people that are very generous with their time and they want to help you and they want to like see you succeed. But at the end of the day, their time is limited, right? So why would they pick you out of 1,000 people that they can mentor, right? Like they have a pick of litter of who they can mentor, right? So you have to find something that you have that they don't have, right? I mean, and that sounds very difficult to achieve, but it's not, right? Because somebody always is missing something, right? I mean, it could be somebody that, let's say somebody has like a lot of money and they have a lot of real estate and they have a lot of real estate knowledge and you want to learn from them, right? Like study them. Okay, they have all this stuff, they have all this power, they have all the strengths, right? What are their weaknesses, right? What weakness do they have that I can help them with? So just, I mean, I'm making up the example, right? But let's say somebody, that particular person that you saw, they're fat, and they haven't exercised. Tell them, hey, you know, I'm a personal trainer. I can help you. I'm going to give you classes for free. I'm going to like train you for free, right? And then maybe use your motivational techniques that you have used with other clients to actually get them to the gym and so forth.
Yeah.
And if you like that, you know, you can get them to lose 20 pounds or get into a healthy lifestyle. Just imagine like what kind of payback they're going to give you, right? I mean, how much are you going to give them, right? I mean, so you always find something to give back in return, Luis. And you're right, like that's such a key.
Yeah. And sometimes that we get in return, it may not even come from them at times. Who knows? We don't know. It may come in other ways.
Yeah.
You know,
100%. It's forget what they call it, right? But like the law of reciprocity or whatever it is. But you're right. Maybe we call it karma, you know. But yeah, you throw
reaping what we sow.
Yeah, 100%, no doubt about it. I'm a huge believer of that, right? Like you got to be positivity all the time, and positivity is going to come right back. If you're a negative person that's always complaining and it's always like looking for the wrong things, right? You're going to find the wrong things, right? If you think that life is unfair and I'm always like the victim, you will always be the victim, right? If you have this mentality of, hey, if opportunity doesn't knock, I'm going to build the door so that I can get through it, right? If you have that mentality, it's going to happen. Right? Like if you have this mentality of every no is the next step that leads me to a yes, right? You have no issues, right? You'll be just fine, right? So yeah.
So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this one as we're getting closer to an end. With your tech background and real estate, where do you feel like real estate will be going?
Great question. So my take on this, Luis, is not going anywhere, right? I mean, like every crisis is different, right? So we have this, I think, mistaken belief, right? That every crisis is going to be like the last crisis, right? And it rarely happens that way, right? I mean, the 2000 crisis was very different than the 2008 crisis, the 1972, and you're young, right? So like you haven't really experienced all the crises, right? You probably read about
I think I was born in 92.
Exactly, right? So you know, like 78, 79 was horrible, right? Then we had like the Thailand crisis. I mean, so there's been a lot of, and it's always something different. It always comes from a different place, right? Like when I was in Mexico I'm trying to remember, I was 12, that's like 40 years ago, right? And we had a horrendous crisis, right? Where the Mexican peso went from $1 to one peso to the dollar, right? To 6 pesos to the dollar within 3 months, right? Just imagine what that did to the country, right? And the U.S. was not doing that well there anyways, right? Like I imagine this was like the Carter years when this was happening, if my math is correct, right? So yeah, but every crisis is different. This crisis kind of reminds me of the Carter crisis where inflation was out of control. A little bit different because back then we did have a little bit more stagflation, meaning the growth was not there. I don't know that we're necessarily going to get there where we completely stagnate and still have inflation. There was a possibility for that to happen, right? When people were not coming back to work and so forth, it looks like we're going to be able to pass that hump. But my expectation is that real estate prices are not going anywhere, right? I mean, they're just going to keep on going up, maybe not at the rate that they went up in 2021, but I think 2022 is also going to be another year of higher prices, higher commodities. Lumber is starting to go up again, fortunately, right? Because like we're starting a new build.
Yeah.
Again, right? But you just have to like put that into your cost of business, right? And make sure that when you run your numbers, run them higher, right? And hopefully you'll be able to like sell it higher as well. And nobody can predict the future. But yeah, I don't think that this is going anywhere as far as like a huge crash, right? The reason that I say that is because if you look at foreclosures, right, we're nowhere near where we were in 2008, right? So 2008 was primarily a foreclosure-driven crisis, right? Where everybody was losing their home. The banks had like way too much product. We talked a little bit about this, right? What a great opportunity that was for the people that had the money to buy these mortgages when the mortgages were available for sale and being able to pick them for pennies on the dollar, right? But that product is not there, right? And if I saw that the numbers kind of bore out that we were going to have another foreclosure crisis, I would be saving my bullets right now to buy as many mortgages as I could when the crisis like finally hit, right? But I don't see that. The foreclosure numbers are just not there. The reason for that, right, is I think the Fed was a lot more proactive in lowering the rates, in issuing liquidity into the market, right? Like creating this securities, buying back bonds and so forth that added all this liquidity into the market. Now, that doesn't mean that just because they did this, it's going to be a free lunch, right? It doesn't mean that there's not going to be any problems, right? And we're seeing it today, right, already with the inflation, right? The inflation didn't happen in a vacuum, right? I think of it as, I give this like analogy of a pizza, right? If you have a pizza and it's cut into 4 slices, right? And then somebody comes in and divides the exact same pizza and says, hey, let's cut this pizza. It's divided in 4. Let's divide it now into 8. Yes, you have 8 slices, but it's still the same pizza, right? So that's pretty much what happened today, right? We didn't really increase productivity, right? Like in the last 2 or 3 years, yeah, I mean, like it's been the normal historical increase in productivity, right? But the Fed increased liquidity by 30%, right? So we didn't have that corresponding 30% jump in productivity. And for that reason, there's not a real 30% increase in the economy, right? So the economy didn't really grow 30%. It's just that the liquidity that's out there and the money supply that's out there increased by 30%, right? So it's more dollars chasing the same goods, right? And that have inflation, right? Like anytime that anybody gets an increase in their salary, right? It's made out of 2 components, right? And people don't want to believe this, and people want to kind of for magic to happen, right? But whenever you get an increase in your salary, it's made up of 2 components. One is the increased productivity that you gave to the employer and the inflation rate, right? Employers are not in the business of, they're not charities, right? So they're not going to willy-nilly give people raises for the same amount of work, right? So that's kind of what we're seeing right now, right? It's, yeah, people are getting higher salaries, but if you didn't get at least a 6% increase in your salary, you actually got a pay cut, right? Because inflation was 6%, or that's the official number too, right? I mean, like you go to the supermarket, prices are up like 20-30%. You go to the gas pump, prices are up through the roof, right? You look at used car prices, they're through the roof. You look at home prices, they're through the roof, right? So the official number is 6%. So if you didn't get a 6% pay raise in your paycheck, you actually got a pay cut, right? But it's not, the Fed doesn't have any magic powers, right? They're just kind of trading things and borrowing Peter to pay Paul and so forth. It's a very interesting game. There's another book actually that I'm going to recommend your listeners, right? It's called The Monster of Jekyll Island. And it explains to you very, very clearly the purpose of the Fed, right? And I'll give you a quick synopsis of the book, right? So the Jekyll Island is an island off the coast of Georgia back in like the 1920s sometime, when they created the Fed for the 3rd or 5th time. People don't realize that this was like just another attempt to create a Federal Reserve, right? So when they finally created this last Federal Reserve that we have, right, it was a secret meeting off of the coast of Georgia. And I'm going to sound like a conspiracy nut, right? But like it's all in the book, it's all documented and so forth. Secret meeting between a senator and 5 or 6 of the most powerful financiers at the time, right? So you name it, the Rockefellers, whatever, like they were all there, right? And they created the Fed with one purpose, right? Most people think that the purpose of the Fed, the mandate, as they call it, of the Fed, is to control inflation and to control employment, right? Like they have this dual mandate of regulating, right? Like having the lowest unemployment rate possible and having the lowest inflation rate possible, and kind of like hitting those two at the same time, right? This book clearly explains the real mandate of the Fed, right? And the real mandate of the Fed is to bail out banks. Think about it, right?
Yep.
It just happened in 2008. What did they do? They bailed out the banks, right? And you're like, oh yeah, but that was the only time. Oh no.
I think it just happened right now with the pandemic.
Sure, yeah, 100%. It happened again today, right? It happened in 2008. It happened in the long-term capital crisis. There was like this scandal that if you Google it, like long-term capital, there was this bank that had to be saved, right? Because it was too big to fail, right? It happened with the savings and loans crisis back in the 1980s, right? With Texas and the oil boom and oil bust and so forth, right? So every single time that it happened, I was mentioning the crisis with Mexico, right? It was not just Mexico that owed the US a lot of money. It was Argentina. It was a lot of countries, right? Who bailed out the banks that had lent like crazy to Argentina and Mexico and so forth, right? The Fed came in and bailed them out, right? So that is the real mandate of the Fed. Right. So don't be fooled, my friend.
Yeah.
But you just got to learn the game, right? You got to understand the game. And if you understand what's going, and if you understand how the power structure is aligning themselves, right? You can then align yourself with this power structure and play their game, right? Don't like they say, don't fight the Fed. That's very true. Like don't fight whatever they're doing. They're way too powerful. They have way too much control. But just go along with what they're doing, right? So like right now it's easy money, right? Like they just open up the spigot, right? Let's go with that, right? Now they're going to closing the spigots. Now we have to start making certain moves, right, to do some of that, right? So like in 2022, I'm shorting some of the stuff that's out there, right? There's definitely a lot of froth in the market, right? Like when you have companies that have sales of, forget about earnings, right? That their prices are 20, 40, 50 times their sales, right? So they're selling $300 million worth of goods in a year and they have a market cap of $50 billion, right? How can that be, right? So when the Fed says, okay, party's over, the music is going to stop, right? Those are the kind of stocks that you want to be short. I'm not going crazy short, right? I'm not 100% short on the market. And, there's certainly value out there, right? So you want to kind of offset your shorts with your longs, right? So companies like a Microsoft, like a Facebook, like Amazon. I love Amazon. I think it's way undervalued right now, right? It didn't do anything last year. I think next year is going to be the year of Amazon, right? And I'm hoping that your listeners are not listening to this and going, I'm going to go all in on Amazon because Alberto said, like, he loves Amazon, right? Like, hopefully the takeaway of your listeners of this is that you got to be diversified, right? So we talked about mortgage notes, we talked about real estate, we talked about shorting stocks, we talked about buying stocks, right? So I have some crypto investments, right? So make sure that you're super diversified across your asset classes, right? Like your typical financial advisor, when you talk to them, they say, oh yeah, you want to be diversified, right? And what they mean is, yeah, you diversify, you buy 30% bonds and 70% stocks, and they call you diversified, right?
Yeah.
There's just so many other ways to diversify yourself, right? Through all the things that we've been talking about in this call, Luis.
That's good. Are you into like Amazon stores or have heard of them, e-commerce?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I
learning about it.
I wish, no, and you should. You're young, you're hungry, hopefully. The only reason that I'm not into them, Luis, is because at some point you have to go, I don't have the bandwidth, right? I mean, I'm developing properties, I'm renting properties, I'm into crypto, I'm into stocks.
You have a lot going on already.
Yeah. So at some point you have to go, okay, let's, kind of park it for a little bit. But having said that, I have friends that do have Amazon stores and they're crushing it. So it's a great thing. It's not very capital intensive, right? I was actually talking to him, right? And my friend, and he's doing unbelievable. He just got a warehouse and like now he outgrew his warehouse. He needs to get something that's like 5 times bigger, and he just keeps on getting product and shipping it as quickly as he can. Let me make it into a quiz. What do you think, Luis, is his biggest seller? He pretty much, for the most part, sells one thing and one thing only, one product type. Take a guess.
Biggest seller.
I'm sorry for putting you on the spot, man.
You threw me a curveball there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I can guess the avatar, perhaps.
Okay.
25-year-old females.
Yeah. He sells candy.
Candy. Wow.
Candy. Pretty much nothing but candy. And it flies off the shelves. And you would think that, like, why candy, right? It's a commodity and so forth, but people love their candy, right? I mean, like, we're the US after all, right? I mean, like, so yeah, he sells it like crazy, and it's just an arbitrage game, right? Like he buys it for $3 and he sells it for $5, or buys it for $2 and he sells it for $4, whatever that number is, right? But it's just flying off the shelves, right? And the beauty of the Amazon stores is that your overhead is so low, right? Like in the real estate business, overhead is crazy high. Like you're buying. It's very capital intensive. You're buying this multi-million-dollar properties and so forth, right? And you don't know if that property is going to be worth what it's worth a year from now, right? I mean, it's definitely a risky proposition, right? With Amazon stores, his turnover, I mean, he's selling this stuff, 2 or 3 days, like that stuff is gone, right? So he has very, very low overhead, and yeah, he's crushing it, right? So he's now expanding into household goods like the razors, things that are expensive but light, right? That's the kind of stuff that he's looking into. But candy is his biggest moneymaker. And I hope I don't get in trouble for spilling the beans, but I think that the market is definitely, big enough for a couple other players. So yeah, that's definitely recommended.
Yeah. Well, you also got to have the right partners, right suppliers. So that's a whole other thing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he works like an animal, for sure. No doubt about it.
So how can people stay in contact with you, learn about what you're up to?
Sure. Yeah, I'll give you my email. My email is alberto@alrencapital.com. alberto@alrencapital.com.
How will you spell Albert?
Oh, sorry. Alren, ALREN, capital, CAPITAL. It stands for Alberto and Karen, right? So Alren is what I named it that way. Karen is my wife, right? And my partner and my life soulmate and whatever you want to call it, right? So that's why we call the company like that. She's definitely an instrumental part of it. And yeah, I mean, we have a website as well, alrencapital.com, where you can see the deals that we've done, We're always looking for people to partner with us as far as investment and so forth. And so happy to chat with anybody that wants to. My contact info, the rest of my contact info is on the website as well.
Awesome. Hey, thank you so much for joining us. I got a lot of value. Definitely love the history behind things. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
We hope you enjoyed this interview and got some value out of it to help you in your real estate investing journey. If you can take just a minute, please do us a favor and leave a review. Hit the like button on iTunes or whatever platform you listen to our podcast on, and subscribe so you can hear future episodes. Also, don't forget to check out our Real Estate Home Runs Podcast Community Facebook group, where you are able to connect with some great listeners. If you're an investor who is crushing it and want to share some information centered around passive income in real estate, please contact us. Hit those home runs, and we will see you next time.